All right, welcome back to another video in the Complete Web Dev series. In this chapter, we are building a content management system using object-oriented programming. In this video, what we're going to do is we are going to continue the routing process. So you remember how we talked about we wanted pretty URLs, and we want to be able to use segments from that URL to determine what controller is loaded and what action is used. And then we want to pass the rest of that as parameters possibly to the action. So let me go ahead and switch over to my screen here. And one thing I haven't done well so far in this series is remember to, at the end of the video, go back and make sure we're saving our code, or committing our code to Git. And so if you haven't done that yet, it's fine right here in main. I'm actually working in separate branches, but you don't have to unless you want to follow along video by video. But if you would like to, if you ever get behind and your code doesn't work like mine at the end of the video and you can't figure out what's going on, you can download my code from the GitHub repository. And I'll have that in the description, a link to that in the description, and just look for the branch of the video we were on. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to type, if you type git status, that will tell you that you probably have things that aren't staged yet. So you will just type git add dot and hit enter. And then if you hit git status again, it'll show you probably everything that's staged at this point. So everything that was red will be green. And so we can go ahead and commit now. We just hit git commit -m space, and we'll do double quotes. And inside of there, go ahead and give this your commit message. This would be something recognizable, like in the last video, what we had done is we had started getting the URL. So started getting the URL. So you can hit enter, and then you can do a git push to push that on up to your remote repository on GitHub. I'm going to go ahead and turn my AC back on because I'm not going to make it through this video if you don't. It's crazy how it gets so hot in here almost immediately. So this will be a little noisy. Sorry about that. We'll kick on and get just kind of noisy and probably just make my microphone sound a little weird, but hopefully it's quiet enough that you can still hear my voice really well. All right, so hopefully the hot weather will be done soon and I can record videos in peace and not have to worry about sweating all over the place. All right, so what I'm going to do here, you don't have to follow on to the next step, but I'm going to create a new branch. So if I hit git branch, it shows the branches that I'm on. Branch 6 is the last video that we did. So I'm going to go ahead and do a git checkout -b v7. So this will be video 7. And I'm going to go ahead and do a git push -u, which I don't have set up yet, so it tells me that I have to do a set upstream origin. So I'll go ahead and do that real quick. It tells me exactly the command I need to run. And now we're good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and clear this. So go ahead and open your, well, first of all, make sure that you have your examp up and running. So it's sudo opt lamp examp start for me. Put in my password, and mine's already running. So now go ahead and open up your project, and let's look at where we left off. Where we left off is if you add a string here. So we're in content management here. The next one would be, let's say we want to go to our BlogController, and we want to go to the index action. If I hit enter there, you can see, well, let's look and see what's going on here. Oh, so I'm just, where we left off is we were getting the Git configuration, and we were just var dumping that database name. So we really don't want that right now. In fact, what we probably want to do here is let's go ahead and get a few things here. First thing that I want to do, let's just go ahead and we can get rid of this. I'm going to set up a variable called root dir, so that'll be root directory, and we'll get that from our configuration file. So if we do config ::git, and this was called root _dir. Now if we var dump that root dir variable, this should tell us the /CMS. This is the root the root right here of our project. Now, if you're on live, this is just going to be a /, but because we are on our local host with example, we are putting this in a subdirectory. So let's go ahead and look at the config file there. And if you look at it, I just have a /CMS right there. What I actually want is another / right there. So that's what I need to do. So now if we go back and refresh, we get the full root path right there, a root directory of our project. Now, this isn't the root from the server. We have that already defined in this constant up here, just called project root. But we're going to define another constant right under here. So we will use the define method, our function rather, and let's just call this root. And we'll do a comma, and then we're just going to set that equal to root directory here. And so now if we var dump, we should have the same answer if we var dump this constant. See, when we do, and so this constant can be used from now on in the rest of our application, which we're going to need. It's a little weird to kind of do this, but I don't want to type out this whole git config thing every time we go to use the root directory. So, all right, the next thing that we want to do actually though is we want to go ahead and get information about our URL. So we want to grab this whole URL string up here and be able to manipulate that and do things with it. And the way that we can do that is we can use a super global that PHP gives us, and we can actually do, let's do URL is equal to, and then what we're going to do is $_server, and then the $_server is the super global that's already set up when the request is made here by our server. And the key that we want here is all uppercase, and it's request _URI. So now instead of var dumping URL, let's var dump this URL variable here and see what we get back from that server. So now you can see that this right here is going to be the entire URL string that we want here. So that's exactly what we want. Now, what we ultimately want to do is take this blog part of this and route that to a controller, and then whatever's after that will be the action, and then whatever's after that will be parameters that go into the action. So we actually don't want this beginning part right here, this CMS, or maybe it's even a /. So what we're going to do is let's go ahead and get rid of that. And so what we can do is redefine this URL and set that equal to a string _replace. Now this is a built-in PHP function, and what it is a function that the first parameter, we can actually tell it what to search for. So what we want to do is we want to search for our root, and we can actually use our constant right here. We want to search for that, and we want to replace that with an empty string. Okay, and then what we want to be able to do, then what we want to do is pass in as the last parameter here the actual string. So we'll just pass in that URL right there and hit save. And now if I go back and refresh, you're going to see that this CMS is going to get replaced because that string replace is searching for the instance of that in our string, which is our whole string, and it's going to replace that with an empty string. So what we should have left is just blog /index. So if I hit refresh now, yep, you can see I just have blog /index. Great, so we're making great progress. The next thing that I'm going to do here is we actually want, let's say we had get variables on here like this. It'd be like a question mark ID equals 4567 and page is equal to 34, something like that. We can see that that's inside this string here, and this will actually mess up our request. So what we want to do now is we want to remove everything after this. So what we're going to do is use a little bit of something called regular expressions to basically parse this string out, and we will find anything that's after this question mark, and we're going to remove all of that from this string now to clean that up. So the way we're going to do that is we are going to once again redefine this URL, and we're going to say URL is equal to, and now PHP gives us this preg replace function, and the preg replace function uses regular expressions and to search. So up here in the string replace, we search this by string. So remember, this string would have been / CMS / and we replace that with an empty string. What we're going to do is use a regular expression, and I know we haven't gone over those yet, but a regular expression starts and ends with a / here like this, and that's in the single quotes. And then what we're going to do is create a group by doing these parentheses, and so everything that's in this group is going to be grouped together, okay? And then what we're going to do is we're going to do a \, because the question mark symbol, once you get into learning regular expressions, the question mark is actually used as kind of an optional thing. So it's used after a symbol or a letter or something, and saying that that's optional, but it still should match. So what we're going to do is do a \ so that we're actually looking for the question mark. So what we're doing is we're looking for this question mark, and that's what that first part of the regular expression is. The rest of the regular expression is going to be this part. So what we're going to need to do there is we're going to say, hey, period plus. Now period just means any character, and plus means no matter how many there are. So get everything that from the question mark forward, basically. And that's what this regular expression means. So it's a pretty simple regular expression, but until you've learned them, it looks a little cryptic. And so the next parameter in this preg replace is, what are we going to replace it with? Well, we actually want to replace it with an empty string, and then what we're going to do is pass in the actual string, which was URL. So now if I refresh, hopefully it takes this entire string, it's going to find this part from the question mark forward with that regular expression, and it's going to replace that with an empty string, effectively leaving us with a cleaned up blog/index. So let's hit refresh, and of course that worked. So we have blog/index. Now whatever happens in our URL, we should be pretty good to go, because now we can parse the rest of this and call our controller and our method. So let's go ahead now and let's just do one more thing here, and let's create inside of our core here, let's create a new file, and let's call this file router. Now this is going to be a class that's going to take care of all the routing for our application. So we're going to call that router.php. Now depending on where you're from, you might pronounce that router, but I cannot say router, so you'll hear me pronouncing it as router. So I'm going to open some PHP tags, and remember with the class, what we're not going to do is close those PHP tags. So we're going to leave them open, and then we're going to give this a namespace so that we can use our autoloader, and we're going to give this a namespace of core. The next thing that we want to do inside of here is, let's see, man, we're not quite to the point yet that I want to be. Just go ahead and type the word class and then router, and then open and close some curly braces here. And for now we're going to create one method in here, and it's going to be called the public static. Now this is a static function, so we're not going to have to instantiate the router. It's a public static function route, and that's the name of the method that we're creating. And what it's going to accept is our URL string. Now this URL string is our cleaned up string, and so we want to make sure that we pass it this cleaned up string here. And so let's just make sure this is working. I like to kind of do this. Let's do our var dump right inside of here, and we're just going to var dump that URL. That's all we're going to do for right now inside this router. So then what we need to do is, in this file back in the index.php, let's go ahead and use, so we're going to, in this use statement right here, if you're using PHP 7 or above, you can use a group if they're both in the same namespace, and you can actually put curly brackets around this, and you could do a comma and then router right there. So this is going to use the config and the router from the core namespace. Okay, the other way to do this is not to do the like this, and then you can have a separate line that was use core router, and you would have to do that one per line, and that's the way you used to have to do it in PHP. But as of PHP 7, they added the ability for us to group these, which is super cool. All right, so now we have router here, and what we're going to do is down at the bottom of the file here, is we're just going to call that router class, and now we're calling a static method, so we're going to hit ::, and we're calling the route method, and then we're going to pass that URL string into there. And so now we can just get rid of this var dump right here, because that's not going to, we don't need that because we actually put the var dump inside of this. And we just want to make sure that the purpose of doing this before we get too far is just to make sure that our autoloader is loading this class and we're calling everything correctly. So when you're first starting out, you can take small increments and see when I refresh it doesn't look any different. And that means that we've included and namespaced this correctly, and it's being, this class is now being auto-loaded through the autoloader that we previously created. And then we can call that static method just like that. So this static method is, we're going to end up building this up to call all of our controllers. So the first thing that I want to be able to do is go ahead inside this core and let's create another class here. And this one's going to be called uppercase, so use uppercase C, and this is going to be our controller.php. And this will also, so just open up some PHP tags. We're not going to do much here right now, but we're going to give this a namespace, and this will also be the namespace of core. And then we're going to define the class, and this is going to be controller, okay? So just go ahead and open and close that like that. And for now, let's just keep this as an empty class. The next thing that I want to be able to do is let's go ahead and create some controllers for us to mess with here in the app. So up in the app, we have a directory we created called controllers. So let's inside there create a new file, and let's call this blog, and now the uppercase B, and then again we're going to do an uppercase C and then controller. So all of our controllers, it's BlogController.php, all of our controllers are going to have the word controller on the end of that class name. So what we want to do here now is we're going to open some PHP tags, and we want to also namespace this, but this isn't going to be namespaced with core because this is in our app. So this is going to be namespaced app / controllers. Okay, so that is the namespace for the app controllers. Now, what we're going to do next is we're going to actually extend our parent class, which is going to be this controller. So that all of our controllers in the app will be children of this controller. So any sort of shared functionality that we want all of our controllers to have, we can define that in our controller.php. So let's go ahead now and let's just set this up. So what we're going to need to do is we actually need to include this or require this in. So we're going to say use, and then we're going to use our core / controller file or class here. And then when we define the class, we'll just say class blog controller. Now this needs to match the file name, and then we're going to extend the controller class. Now, we talked a little bit about this in the last chapter about what inheritance is and how we can create a child class of this class. So this is the first time we're actually doing this in a project, and so I don't want you to miss that we have this controller class that we just created, and anything that we add, as long as it's not private, anything that we add here in this controller will be inherited by this because we are extending that controller there. All right, so I hope that makes sense. Let me see how long the video is so far. We are at about 19 minutes. I can do a little bit more, I think. And so what I want to be able to do here is construct this controller. But I don't want to write a constructor on each controller, so we're going to do that in the parent class. So inside this parent class, let's do a couple things. Number one, let's go ahead and set up a couple properties. So let's just set some private properties, and the private properties are going to be $_controller name. Now, it's just a convention to start private and protected properties with an underscore. That's not necessary, but it lets us know when we see it later in the code that those are private and protected. And then we could just do a comma, and we're going to set up another one called action name right here. And then we'll do a semicolon. And then we're going to set up a couple private or public ones. So say public, and this will be the view and the request. Now we're not going to do anything with those just yet, but I just want to get them there. The next thing that we're going to do is do our constructor. Now our constructor is going to have, we're going to use the magic method that PHP gives us. So it's public function underscore underscore, so that's 2 underscores, construct. And what this is going to take is a controller as the first parameter and an action as the next parameter. And so all we're going to do here for now is inside here we're going to say this controller name is equal to controller, so that's the passed in name, and we'll also say this underscore action name is equal to action. So we're going to, when we construct these, what it's going to end up looking like is in our router here. Let's just go ahead and try this. So in our router, this isn't how we're going to keep this, but I want to do use app / controllers / blog controller. And what this is going to do is load this blog controller here. So inside of our route, what I'd like to do here is we'll do let's say controller is going to be equal to, and in this case we're just going to hard code this. We're going to say blog controller, and we're going to pass in blog, oops, and then we're going to, as a second parameter, we're going to pass in, let's do index action. Now this is hard coded, and I'm not going to really explain all too much about what this is going to do, but we'll get into that later while we finish up this routing. So what is this complaining about? Undefined function, and that's because I didn't instantiate it with the new keyword. So now we have new blog controller, and this blog controller now is going to set an object that's instantiated from the blog controller class to this controller variable. So then what we can do, well, actually what we'll do here is inside of our controller, let's just, inside the constructor here, let's go ahead and var dump controller. Okay, so then let's go back now, and if everything's correct, we should be able to refresh now, and you can see that we have a var dump here called blog. Let me get rid of that other blog, let me get rid of this other var dump here inside of this route method for now. And if we refresh, now we just get blog. Okay, so this is working. What's happening is we are instantiating a new blog controller object, which we created here, and it's instantiating because this is a child. When we call that new, when we instantiate that object here in the router and we say new blog controller, it's actually calling this on construct. Now, even though we define this in the parent class, because we extended that, that is still happening here in this child class. And that's why the var dump will actually var dump that controller name right there. All right. So let's just kind of stop there. for this video. In the next video, we're going to continue on building up our controller class and our router route method so that we can dynamically build out this instantiation, because we want to call base this blog instead of hard coding this in. We actually want that, remember, to come from the URL right there, and we want to dynamically instantiate the controller based upon the URL. Okay, so that's how we're going to do all of our routing for this project. So if you're a little confused right now, don't worry too much about it. We're kind of thick in the weeds, and it's hard to show you what we're doing until you see more of it. So if you're a little confused right now, just follow along. Don't be too concerned if you're behind. And just understand that what we've done in this video basically is we've cleaned up our URL. So we've gotten the URL as a string from the server, and then we have replaced our root off the beginning with an empty string. So we've cleaned that up, and then we got any sort of query parameters that would be passed in as get parameters. We've just gotten rid of those as well, and then we created a router with a route method, and for now all we're doing is passing that URL into it, which is what we're going to do. And then this method is not implemented fully yet, but when we finish this method, this route will actually dynamically instantiate the correct controller and call the method inside of that controller, and that is how we're going to control what the user gets returned to their browser is from these controllers and then the methods inside of those controllers. So we've just set up a very bare bone controller parent class here, which we will add to later, and we've actually created a blog controller here that is pretty much empty. The only functionality this has right now is what it's inheriting from the parent class, which is this controller class. The only other thing that we've done is cleaned up the root directory here. So let's go ahead now, and I'm going to go ahead and commit this to Git. So back here in the terminal, if I do git add period, and then I'm going to do a git status, this is going to show me all the modified files that are now staged because I did the git add. So let me go ahead and commit that. So git commit -m to add a commit message, and we'll put the beginnings of the router class, and we'll hit enter. And now if I do a git status, it tells me that I'm ahead of the origin by 1 commit. So I'm going to go ahead and I am going to git push that. And now you have a branch on the remote that will be exactly where I left off at the end of this video. The only other thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to merge this back into my main. I keep saying master. I'm going to merge this into my main branch. So I'm going to do a git checkout main, and then I'm going to do git merge v7, which will merge the v7 branch into my main branch. And then I will do a git status, and it's going to say that this is ahead of the origin main, which is my remote server on GitHub. So I'm going to do a git push, and now I am completely up to date on my local machine with my GitHub account. All right, with that, guys, I will see you in the next video. I'm excited to keep moving on. I know this is a little bit convoluted and weird right now, and that's kind of the nature of setting up an MVC style website. Is there's a lot of upfront weird work, but long term, it makes it way more maintainable, and we can reuse actually all the code we're doing in this. You can actually use this as a framework once you learn it real well to build your own websites from it, and you're not going to have to do all this over and over again. So we're actually building our own framework. Now it's going to be bare bones and basic, but we're building our own framework that we can start from and quickly build websites from. That's the key, is that you write more complicated code once that you know works well, but then you just remember how to use it, and every time you go to build a site, if you use that framework that you wrote, you don't have to do this again. And that's the beauty of object-oriented programming, is you're writing reusable code that you can use on other projects. And so actually what we'll end up doing is this core directory and this index file and the htaccess file you'll copy over to your other new websites when you go to build them. And then you'll also have this app directory, but the controllers and all of this are going to be empty directories. So you'll have controllers, models, and views that'll be empty, and you'll just add those controllers and views and you'll be ready to go. You won't have to rewrite any of these core functionalities. So everything in this core is going to be the framework part, and so that's pretty cool. And you'll see how powerful this gets. It's going to be pretty powerful. It's not going to be like a Laravel or anything like that, but we'll be able to use this to build our project really, really quickly. But it is a lot of extra coding up front compared to building the same thing with procedural PHP. So that is the downside of it, but it's more maintainable and reusable in the future. So you kind of slow in the beginning, but it speeds you up long term. All right, with that, guys, I will see you in the next video. Please comment, like, subscribe. There's the super thanks if you guys have a few dollars you want to throw to help me stay incentivized to do this. I don't make much money off this. Someday maybe I'll show you guys how much YouTube pays me to do this. It's pretty funny. I don't do it for that, though. I'm doing it for you guys, and I want to give something back. But if you feel like you want to give something back, you can, if you're blessed in that way. If you're not, then hey, don't worry about giving any money. You guys just keep giving it all your all and learning, and then someday pay it forward and teach someone else or help someone else that needs help. All right, I'll talk to you guys later. Check out freeskills.life if you want some merch.